Hello everyone and welcome back to PCA's Garage. It's Tech Tactics Live episode 15 and today we're shopping for an air-cooled 911. More specifically, we're taking a look at this 964. If you've watched some of our videos before, you've probably recognized this car. It's a car that PCA has acquired. But for tonight's exercise, we're going to pretend as though, let's see, often I'm doing picking cars from the mart for our bi-weekly Mart Fresh that you might have seen in eBreak News. And so we kind of window shop every 2 weeks on what's going on in the mart. So logically, what's the next step once you find that car? And I thought this car would be a perfect example of how you should go about buying a 964 or the air-cooled era. So again, I just want to remind folks, be sure to like and subscribe and comment. I've got my phone here. I'm not going to be behind the bench here tonight. We're going to be actually crawling all over this car, and we're going to give away some things tonight. So make sure that you put your name and where you're from in the live chat area by, I believe it's 8:20. Read the instructions. I think it's 8:20. You have to get your name there. Tonight we're giving away two things. First thing is we're giving PCA T. I picked this one. It's kind of hard to tell in the picture, but it's actually a black and red t-shirt that matches this car, so I thought that'd be pretty cool. And then our second item is going to be a paint meter, which we will use to kind of go around and maybe figure out the story behind this car. So let's say you found a car that you're interested in the mart or wherever, and now it's kind of the next step that you go. And so what I always talk about is maybe getting a shop, a pre-purchase inspection or something like that, but I think that's even more of a commitment. I think the first thing you really need to do is go take a look at the car. Hopefully it's nearby and you can drive up and meet the owner, but don't go by yourself. Go with someone that you know that has experience in the model that you're looking at. Again, 964, let me think about someone locally here that has a 964. They have a street 964, a white one, and they campaigned a white 964 club racing car known as Underbody. And he also lives local to PCA headquarters. He's also the past president of PCA, and he's probably one of the most knowledgeable 964 guys around. And tonight, for the first time having someone in our garage that's external, that's not a staff member, we have past president Manny Albin over there.
Hey everybody.
So he's across the garage, and for the first part of this, because we're pretty far away, we're going to keep our masks off. But once we take a look at the car, we'll throw our mask on just to be safe, and then we'll walk around. And just you guys can kind of come along and look at this car and decide, is it worth what it's worth? Is it worth it to buy? And what would you do with it? So let's first talk about, Manny, let's talk about 964s. And just recently, I wouldn't say recently, but if you look at prices on 964s, oh, I'm sorry, I should go through the agenda, so let me take a quick peek. So we're going to go through the brief overview of 964, our candidate here. We're going to take a look at the outside of it, the inside of it, under the front bonnet, below the engine lid. We'll actually put it up on the lift and look at it from underneath. And then we'll talk about what's it worth and would you buy it. And of course, please put your questions in the live chat area and we'll try to pull out a number of them and answer them. So we want it to be interactive. So again, going back to the 964. Let me throw out two true and falses to get started with this. So the first true and false, let's see here. The 964 was the last of the air-cooled, true or false? 964 was the last of the air-cooled. Hopefully you know this one, and of course the answer is false. Let's go with the next true-false. Less than 50% of the 964 is different from the 88 911. Less than 50%. And the answer on that one is also false. So that throws us into just talking about the 964s. Manny, you raced a 964, you have a street one, you've always liked them. Why?
Well, when I first went looking for one, I wasn't looking for a 964, I was looking for a 3.2. And of course, whenever you start looking for a car in particular, you can't find any. And everywhere I asked, I could only find cabriolets, Targas, and they were 964s. And the people who had 3.2s were asking big money for it back in '94, I believe, when I bought my first 964. So I found this white 964, and it had everything I wanted. And my friend told me, buy it, you won't regret it. He had an RS America, and he was absolutely right. I fell in love with the car, and I ended up turning that car into a race car. And then while I was racing it in 2008, I saw the prices of 964s had just plummeted. They were really low, 17, 18,000. You could buy one any day of the week. And so I convinced my wife that it would be a great parts car if I found one, because the engine and transmission alone were worth the what the entire car was being sold for. So I bought a white one as a parts car, which turned out to be a car really in incredible shape. And I eventually sold the race car to another friend of mine, and now the white car, what I call it, is my permanent 964, and people are amazed that I bought this thing originally what I thought was going to be a parts car.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, when the 964 came out in the late 80s, I think it was 89 was the first year.
Correct.
Like people, you could tell it was different from an 88 car, but it wasn't that different looking. I mean, it was, it was a little bit more smoother look. Actually, I think people kind of complained initially that it lacked character because it was so like smooth, and it wasn't that different from the 3.2 before it. Do you remember anything about that?
Yeah, it was. It wasn't a love-hate, but it was modern. But yeah, people had to remember they had seen the Underbody style from '74 to '89. So that was a long time to get used to that body style, which became the iconic 911 for the longest time. So when the 964 came, that was a big difference with polypropylene bumpers. It was just some people loved it, some people didn't. For a while there, people called it the orphan car because they claimed it was just a buffer, a gap to fill in before the 993 came. So that kept, I think, the prices low. And of course, some of the urban legends about the cars that were a little bit exaggerated that would go wrong with them. So that all contributed to keeping the price fairly low on those cars.
So I know, Robert, you can flip through all the overview pictures of the different 964s as we talk about them. The 964 isn't probably, if you go to a car show these days and you talk about the last of the air cooled, it's not the 964 that most people think of. Most people are, as you mentioned earlier, talk about the 993, and as a true false statement earlier, the 993 actually was the last air-cooled Porsche, and the prices on those had gone up, I think, quicker than the 964s. But as of late, 964 pricing has kind of gotten a little ridiculous too.
Yeah, when I was looking for my 964, a 993 was still selling, and this was in '08 when I was looking for the parts car. A 993 was selling in mid-30s. They wouldn't go any lower. So that was out of the picture even when pricing was fairly low back during the recession. So it was a car, I think, that people started to realize that it had some of the modern comfort features of a 993. Had the newer suspension, but it still had the old body style to it. The upright fenders, the headlights looked just like the classic 911. And I knew we were at an open house here a few years back, and someone came up to me who had a 993 and just gushing over my 964. And I chuckled and I said, "Well, you have a 993, you have the best." And he said, "No," he goes, "I want a 964." And that made me think maybe I'm onto something. I should keep this car for a while.
Well, I remember, so Manny and we used to autocross together, and I have an '87 911, and one day we decided to switch because we were running neck and neck, and we were wondering if the cars were really the difference between the times for us, and we switched. And I remember you getting out of my car and like shaking your head going, "How do you drive this thing?" And I remember getting out of your car and going, "Dude, you don't even have to work to make this car going around cones. It shifts smooth. You can go back into first gear, super easy. You got tons of power." Like although when it was introduced, some people kind of complained that it didn't look that much different from the previous generation, the driving of it's definitely progressive compared to the old one.
Yeah, it's definitely more of a modern suspension, and that's how they build it. It was a huge, even though the outside looked maybe the same as the 911, a lot had changed underneath. And once again, the creature comforts, air conditioning that actually worked, a heater that you could actually set to a certain temperature and it would stay at that temperature. It was a definitely a modern 911, and a lot of people, I think that first gen air conditioning is probably about as rough they want to get for the 964, and plus had ABS too, which is a huge advantage as a safety feature.
Yeah, so from after that switch at the autocross, my explanation for why I might be slower on a particular day is he just drove a more modern, newer car with more horsepower and much easier to drive. So that helped me out in the excuses list.
Which yours is very vast.
All right, so we're already at 8:15. Time flies. We've got a lot to do. Let's take a look, or let's talk about our candidate. This is a 1990. Let me see if I can adjust the camera here for you guys. All right. So this is a 1990, and this is a C4, meaning that it's all-wheel drive. Just a cursory look. It's quite beautiful now. We in our previous YouTube video where we did paint correction, we brought the paint back to life on this car. We worked pretty hard. It was a group effort here at PCA headquarters. Here's some video if you haven't watched that one. This car was dull and it looked like it had white milk all over the car. But you know, the paint that Porsche has, I mean, this is single stage paint, and we were able to just, you know, it's just beautiful. And I know if we spend a little bit more time, we could make it just about perfect. But so single stage, guards red, 1990 C4. It had been sitting for, I think, at least 9 years outside, and there's some areas that definitely show that. But it's only got 36,000 miles. 36,000 miles. And if you just looked at it cosmetically, initially you might question it, but as we started opening things up, and we'll share that with you here shortly, you know, it's definitely showing signs where it's a low mileage car. So that's the good news. So let's just take a walk around it. Maybe Manny, let's put our mask on and we'll start up front and work our way back. So if you haven't noticed, at the very top, man, you can point it out. This car has a rare option or lack of an option that's pretty cool, and there is no sunroof on this car. So share with folks what you think about that.
That was first thing I thought when he sent me pictures when he first picked it up was this must be a European model, because it's my understanding was they all came with sunroofs in the U.S. Obviously, this is not true. I don't think they put this on afterwards, a slick top. So I would love to know from people watching if you have a 964 that isn't an RS America or a Carrera RS that doesn't have a sunroof. That would be really interesting to see how many people really have one. So this is, believe it or not, a desirable feature of the car. Used to be a sunroof would add value to it, but every one has a sunroof. So this gives you more headroom, and it doesn't have the sunroof. So it's for coupes, which people are looking for, this is an added bonus.
So it's more than just the fact that, because sometimes just because we don't have it in the States or it's rare here in the States, you might find that in other countries that it's more common that we like it. Like it might be, you know, the clear lights or H4s versus H5. But I think sunroof delete in a 964, for me, it's one less thing that's complicated that can possibly leak and be a problem down the road. But as Manny said, it actually makes a big difference in headroom inside the car. So, and then you throw in the fact that there aren't many of them out there that are non-sunroof cars. So it's pretty cool. We thought it might be a Euro car, but you know, upon closer inspection, and we'll show you, we'll take a look, it's definitely a US car.
Yeah, definitely. It's, but it's, I would love to hear from anyone who has another slick top US 964.
Yeah, so if any of you that are watching have a non-sunroof 964, just let us know in the live chat and let us know how you ended up with it. All right, so let's go to the front, Manny. And why don't you pop open the bonnet there. I have a little prop rod because let's take a closer look here.
Most people with 964s have something to hold it up.
Of course, I'm going to go straight for the 90s upgraded Denon radio pull-out. Look at that. That's pretty cool. Obviously, we're not going to use that because we installed a Porsche Classic radio recently, the CD changer, and I think there's CDs in it, so we'll take that out.
One of the features I pointed out to Vu, and anyone who has a, well, I would say late model 90s type of 911 will see that this has the very rare tabs intact. This is the compressor, and I'm afraid even to open it up, but we'll try it.
Don't break it.
Very gently. Has all the parts to it. I don't think he
new.
ever used it. Yeah, brand new, and the tabs.
Yeah.
Try going to a swap meet and finding these with tabs still on them. So the guy, obviously, another indication this may be the actual miles on it.
Get a closer look for you guys. Look at that.
Without
Brand new.
getting too, that's the toolkit. Another thing you don't find on cars these days is toolkits, because obviously the manufacturers don't expect you to work on the cars anymore.
Tools are nice and clean.
Yeah, they're all just like missing a few of the tools, but majority seem to be here.
Unused. Cool.
Yeah, and even the pouch is worth money now.
All right, let's just put that aside here. So when you're looking inside here, you also want to take a look at all the stickers, which is important. And here's where you'll find your option codes. And we ran the option codes. There's a website, I think we're going to put it up, where you can find out what these option codes mean. And what we found out was, like, it has the Blaupunk radio, it has the plush leather, it has the power seats. So everything on this sticker definitely corresponded with what we're finding with the car, so that was good.
And you won't see air conditioning because that was a standard on these cars. A lot of it was standard. That's why the 964 was such a high-priced car that they were having trouble selling, which of course led us to PCA helping to build the RS America.
One of the things that when we first looked at this car, although the outside of it looked way more than 36,000 miles, when we popped this up and just looking at the carpet, I mean, it's nice and fresh, and I mean, still very fluffy. It's in great shape.
This part here also, because usually this is where you put your tools at, and it would bend out, kind of like the back of a seat on a car. You put enough maps in there and junk, it just starts to bend down. So the fact this is still fairly upright is impressive.
Yeah. All right, folks, it's almost 8:20, so make sure that you put your name in the live chat so that you can have a chance to win those prizes. All right, Manny, let's take a look down the sides of the car. What do you think about that?
Well, the main thing is, using my Concord judging skills, there's not maybe one door ding, just a slight one that can be easily taken out. The gaps look pretty decent on this car. That's a telltale sign of body work if they didn't take the time to line up the gaps. We have rust, and this is something that's very common. Just remember, just because it's galvanized doesn't mean it's never going to rust. I think the galvanized part had a warranty, maybe 7 years, so it didn't. If the car wasn't taken care of, if the rubber seals weren't taken care of, if water got underneath here, it would start to rust. And here we have signs of rust here, here, and here. So that would take, that's going to take some work, taking the windshield out and, getting it all correct again.
I know we're looking at the photo with all the bumper trim and stuff. Little stuff like that might be missing. But we'll just kind of go back here real quickly and share with you the rust on the bottom of the windshield. As Manny said, it's pretty common. But not irreparable.
No,
right?
it's not fatal. It's not. You got to factor that into the price because that's going to be. It's not going to be cheap. It's body work, and you don't know how deep this rust goes. Very fixable, but once again, it's a sign this car was kept outside. Yeah. Definitely, you can tell by the rubber seals, what they call a smile, I guess. That's kind of faded. All signs of a car that was just stored outside.
But the car is very straight though. I mean, from the side, you're very few dings. On this side here, I'll move the camera here, sorry. I'll just move the camera a bit. There we go. So if you look down the sides of the car here, one little scratch there, but everything else is straight and just, it's beautiful. Since we're talking about prizes and stuff, let me share with you guys. Paint meter. One of you will get one of these paint meters if you win the raffle. And this is something kind of cool. If you don't have one, get one, because then you can find out what the story is with the car. And a car typically has what, 5 to 7 mils of paint from the factory.
Yeah, in certain areas you should be consistent.
Yeah,
and a lot of times the owner doesn't know the story because they may be the second, third owner. So to them, their knowledge, it may never have been painted.
So this one's got 5.7 mils. This here, and what you're looking for is you might not know the number for a car, but you're looking for consistency. Yeah. And here's something that we found: 5.7 on both fenders, and then here 7.2, 7.9. So a little bit of a variation. So maybe it was painted. Looking at the doors at 4, so that's definitely original. Here 5, that's original. Right back here, 5, that's original. We get to the tail lid, 10 on the tail lid. So something has happened. Something happened back here, right? So we want to take a look at that. So 6 here. So the car is quite consistent. 6, 4. So the car is very consistent, metering out paint-wise. The back lid, something must have happened there. You know, it is an older car, so certainly possible. All right, let's take a look at the inside. And I know we have some photos because it'll be a little bit hard to show you all this, but so if you take a look inside, you can tell the car has sat a while. The leather is a little faded. There's definitely mildew and dust, but it doesn't have a strong mildew odor like there was standing water in it, right? It just kind of, it probably just was outside and just.
Another advantage of not having a sunroof is you don't have to worry about drain holes getting clogged and water coming inside. So that was definitely a advantage. Disadvantage, if you look at it, is that it's a light color leather, so it will show dirt if you don't maintain it, which this one needs a good cleaning, but I think good cleaning, probably conditioning of the leather, and it's going to come back beautifully.
And the carpets in here are just like the carpets in the trunk. They're still nice and high pile, nice and soft. You look at the odometer and you see 36,000 miles. And if you look at the shifter, you look at the e-brake handle, it looks like it's not been, it's not 136,000 miles, that's for sure. It looks like it could be a 36,000 mile car. If you take a look at the pedals, which Nathan Mers often tells me, that's a telltale sign of mileage because not many people will replace those. And looking at these pedals, they look pretty darn good. They don't look worn out.
The clutch and brake are easy to replace. The accelerator, not many people do that, and that's where you can see wear, just like the sole of a Sneaker. And this one doesn't have wear of a 100,000 mile car.
What was it that you were mentioning earlier about the gauge faces, man?
So on my car is 163,000 miles, and you can start to see when you turn the lights on, especially at night, you can see little dots that somehow have gotten into over time and started chipping away at the gauge face. And on the race car that I had, it was like a constellation, but I didn't really race it at night. But it's a telltale sign of really how old the car is, unless they've gotten the gauges redone, which is pretty rare because when you get those redone, they clean it up and make it look brand new, and the rest of the gauges look old. So these look like their original gauges and in very good shape.
And don't forget to look up. A lot of times people forget to look up, and the headliner on this car is amazing. It is brand spanking new looking. Yeah, you look at the rear deck, you look at the third brake light and everything. I'm a believer of this car is 36,000 miles. It's been sitting outside, so it just needs some of the other
Yeah, the
stuff.
dash looks great. There's no
Yeah.
cracks. I mean, these were pretty hardy wearing dashes, but nonetheless, for a car that spent its life outside, um, it weathered well. Hopefully, he had a cover on it for a long period of time.
All right, so let's move to the next true and false because we're going to be talking about engines. So let's do our third one, true and false. The 964 engine contains mechanical valves. True or false? True or false? True. So my 87 has mechanical valves that I know I have to adjust periodically. I did not realize that a 964, I thought they kind of moved to hydraulics.
No, that was a 993 when they finally moved to hydraulic. You didn't have to adjust your valves, I think, every 15,000 miles. So that's why it's good to have records, because if they don't have records, you want to get that done right away, so not to cause any damage to the engine. But and it's not a job that is for the first-time beginner. You got to remove a lot of things to get to the valves to be able to adjust them and know what you're doing.
Taking a look back here before we lift up the engine lid, I noticed a crack here. And it's almost perfectly centered, and I thought that was maybe from the factory, but you told me that is not.
Yeah, that's one of the first thing I asked you was, did it have the crack? Because that's one of those unicorns that if it doesn't have a crack, and I think every 964 owner, maybe this is a birthmark you can have, but it must be something with the fact this is all one piece and the different thicknesses of the...
But it doesn't look bad because it cracked really
yeah.
perfectly center there. So I think most people, like me, I just thought it was supposed to be like
It's
that.
like the spoiler wall. The spoiler doesn't work, but when you come up, there's a little wall, plastic wall that folds up too, and a lot of them, they're broken. Mine it is. You probably won't feel a difference in performance or cooling.
Is it like the accordion, like on my 996?
Not the accordion, it's just like a plastic wall that comes up. And but that's one of those things that break down.
All right, you guys, are you ready to look at the heart of this beast? And this is where you'll see that,
And before we open it, one expensive item to replace is these taillights and center section.
Oh, yes.
The taillights, now you price these taillights compared to an 89 911. It is, I think, 10 times more. It's phenomenal how much more.
Really?
Yeah, it's very expensive. And they crack and they have like crazing. And there's 2 generations. On your spare parts, you have the upgraded one which had the vents instead of the rubber seal on it, but you almost have to replace all of it, and the center section is equally expensive because they turn pink, and this one here is uniformly pink, so they don't look bad, but when you put on these new lights on this, it's going to make this look very faded. A lot of people, they covered it in like a red vinyl cover, which the brake lights still show through, and it looks a little bit newer.
So we were pretty fortunate. In the back seat of this car when we picked it up was tons of parts, and I'll show you later, but it had 2 brand new taillights, and you can definitely tell that it's more red.
Yeah, and the venting here was to help prevent, I think, crazing and whatnot of the light.
So brand new pieces, 2 of them for this car, so that's good.
So when if you're looking at a 964 and they have this treasure trove of used parts, that's a big plus because it's going to save you money in the long run.
All right, Manny, show them the heart of this beast.
So the 964s all came with the, at least for the normally aspirated, the 3.6, which was a twin plug engine. It was rated 247 horsepower in the US. It's a phenomenal engine. I have not reached the limit of 240 horsepower, so when I look at people driving 500 horsepower, it's pretty awe-inspiring. Very reliable engine if you maintain it. It's basic same design as a 3.2. It's still the flat 6. It's DME injection. It's
2 distributors.
Yeah, 2 distributors. I believe is mainly for emissions. And this is another item to check. Is there's a belt that drives these 2 distributors, and the belt is very inexpensive, and it's not that expensive to actually replace the belt. A lot of people don't do it. When the belt breaks, it will stop the distributor, second distributor at one point, and basically starts firing in that cylinder. And eventually, the car's going to run rough, at least mine did, and eventually it'll just put a hole inside of a cylinder. So you want to, one of the things when you buy 964 is have that belt replaced as soon as possible, unless there's a record that showed that it's been recently done. This one you can't see, I think, from the camera, but it has the vent upgrade, which is this little clear hose. So in the distributor, there was a lot of ozone that was building up, and that would deteriorate the belt, the drive belt. So Porsche did this upgrade where you could run air that's coming off the fan into the distributor and take away that ozone. And it's easy to install if you don't have that upgrade on your 964.
Manny, why don't you show that to them? I'll get the camera a little bit closer.
So I don't know if you can get inside the engine compartment, but it feeds it from the blower all the way into the distributor.
Okay.
So it's just giving fresh air, so the belt doesn't wear out prematurely.
So I notice with this car, all the rubber pieces in here are just.
And this is all fortunately readily available. Some people delete the heater blower motor. I like heat, so I kept it on mine. You can still get a little like a bypass they had for the, I think it's called the RS bypass.
Yeah.
Makes the engine look a little bit cleaner, but once again, I like heat.
So here's a question for this car, or probably the biggest concern about this car. This car has been sitting here for about we're sitting at the previous location, I think 9 or 10 years, and hasn't been started. And we do not know if this car runs. Well, we know it doesn't run. We just don't know what the true condition of this engine is. So that's going to be something that we're going to talk about in terms of the value of the car. We don't believe the engine is locked up. Certainly you want to, we'll spin it at some point. Obviously flush all the fluids. We don't want to do anything now and risk possibly damaging something. So you want to change out all the fluids, fresh battery, fresh plugs, and we'll see if we can't get this thing started. But for now, that's the big question about this car is, does it run?
Yeah, if you're looking at something, like we said, if this we were really considering buying it, this would be a huge difference in what you would offer the seller, because there's no history, there's no paperwork on the engine. You don't know if you're looking at a paperweight or something that you just have to drain the fuel and the oil and get it running. They are very reliable engines, but once again, if they're taken care of.
All right, Manny, so let's, since we have the luxury of it being on a lift, make sure everything is clear on that side. And why don't we throw up the, the winners. Okay, so Dark Closet of the Mine, you've won the paint meter, and Flat 6, you've won the PCA t-shirt. So make sure you send a message to Damon. Flat 6, let us know what shirt size you need, and we will get both of those prizes out to you guys. Let's throw up the next true or false as I put the car up and take a look at the bottom. The C4 drivetrain is the same as the 959. True or false? False. Manny, you want to talk about that while this car goes up?
Yeah, let's say it's inspired, but we all like to think that they learned from the 959 and moved it just over to the 964. The 959 was a very complicated animal, and it did their all-wheel drive did things that was just way too expensive to put it in a real lower price street version. So the spirit of the 959 drivetrain is there, but it's not a 9.5 drivetrain. It's a whole different animal. And there's a lot you can read out there about what the 959 did with height adjustments, torque bias. You know, it's an incredible vehicle, but of course it was priced much higher than a regular 964 was.
Well, hold on, let me lower it on the safeties. One of our viewers was asking about the weight of this car. Do you know roughly?
I would think maybe it was coming close to 3,200 maybe?
I was thinking 3,200.
Yeah, the C2 was 3,101.
Okay.
So I'm going to guess maybe 125 pounds, 120 pounds. Was it very mechanical with the all-wheel drive versus the The 993 was a lighter weight.
All right, so this is where you can really tell this car has been sitting for a while. We've got some pictures of the suspension and such, the underbody that we'll throw up and let you see what we're looking at. Let's start from the front. The good news, I think, is I know a lot of 964s, this grill part kind of is an upside down smile and lots of damage here normally, but this is actually pretty straight. I didn't realize 964s had so many little drain holes here.
Yeah, it looks like it's only missing one, which is pretty good because that means they weren't running over curbs like they were in a movie being chased.
So everything looks pretty straight. Definitely has been sitting around. Robert, if you throw up that one suspension picture, let me just show you some of the stuff that we found. So this is the, yeah, you can see the bushings are really toasted. Here's a bushing. You can look at the tie rod ends, need some work. So I would say this car needs a full suspension refresh.
Yeah, you're talking about a 30-year-old car, so it would, even if the car was in perfect shape, it's still a good idea after 30 years to replace some of this stuff. Like brake lines. The brake lines look somewhat decent, but you want to replace those.
So let me, okay, that camera's on, so let me just show you guys real quickly. This is the bump stop for a 30-some-year-old car. It's not a big deal. All this stuff can be replaced, but you know, you just got to know going into it, this is the kind of stuff you're going to have to replace. So we move along. Oops, sorry. Move along down the line. No structural damage in the midsection, which is great. Then we get to the back, which is a little bit more interesting. Again, suspension stuff, definitely tired. I don't see oil, which is, it's very dry under here.
Yeah, and remember the early 964s suffered from everywhere you read in buyer's guides, they said about a cylinder head leakage because there was no head gasket. It was in 92, I believe, or 93 maybe, middle of 92, they switched over to a head gasket style. So a lot of them, though, have been, that problem has been corrected, either by dealers or independents. So unfortunately, since we don't have records, we don't know if that was the case or this is lucky that it wasn't leaking.
Or there's no oil in it.
Mine is it. There's no oil.
There could be no oil. Maybe
that's an old English car joke there somewhere.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, mine's just starting to leak after 163,000 miles, which I guess I can't complain because I'm closing in on an engine rebuild.
The oil return tubes don't have any leaks, which is another thing that could go wrong there. It looks like it has the original heat exchangers.
And for those that are new to air-cooled Porsches, obviously there's no radiator, there's no antifreeze, but there's a lot of oil and a lot of oil lines and tubes, rubber hoses that can start to get old and crack. So that English joke about oil dripping and whatnot applies to 911s sometimes too.
What I do notice under here that is not factory is the exhaust. Looks like it has a Fab Speed exhaust. Looks like it's in fairly good condition. This is a single out. So you can see is this a pre-muffler?
Yeah, so the original 964s, and this looks like the original, they had two mufflers. You can see Bischoff, so yeah, this is all original here. And that added a lot of weight to the car. So easy upgrade, almost from the beginning, was to either remove one of these or one of these, like the RS did. Makes it a little bit louder, and you remove a lot of weight out of the rear of the car.
Okay, so this is OEM factory. The muffler here is definitely aftermarket, and the tip looks like it's aftermarket.
It's aftermarket, yeah. And what's missing, we're so used to seeing it without it, is there was a tray underneath here. That's what these little mounts are, where the tray gets mounted to.
So is it like a T shape?
No, it's like a square that covers.
It would cover the heat exchangers too?
Yep. It covered that. It's pretty. You can see where different parts of the mounts were mounted to, and it was a great oil collector. You wouldn't see dripping unless it came through the vent part of it. But by the mid 90s, late 90s, everyone was saying take it off because it gives better cooling. And I think they put it on originally for sound, to keep the sound down, because remember air-cooled engines were louder than water-cooled. So this was just another step to quiet down, but you don't see them anymore on 964s.
The brakes too, we walk around, I'm noticing the rotors they're heavily corroded. So you're probably looking at new rotors, possibly new calipers because they haven't moved in,
or at least rebuilding them. And the neat thing about 964 C4s is that the C4 had a 4-piston caliper in the rear. The C2, until I think 92, 93, only had a 2-piston caliper. And so you got better braking with the 964, or the C4. The C4 is also what they used to make cup cars. Because you look at the hydraulic braking and whatnot was an advantage, and it had bigger bearings in the hubs. So I learned all this when I turned my car into a race car. We upgraded a lot to a 964 with a beefier suspension.
And these are the D90 wheels that would have come with this car?
Yeah, it's like the flag mirrors for 964 enthusiasts. You love them, you hate them.
Yeah.
But they didn't come out to 17-inch to maybe 92.
Yeah,
that brake.
These are huge 16-inch rims.
Mm-hmm.
And these tires are old. I think they're so old they don't even have like the uniform date code on them. They're all cracked, and they require being pumped up at least every 2 weeks.
Yeah, we definitely don't want to test drive it on this.
No.
At least not more than just around the block and back.
All right. Have you had enough for the underneath?
Yeah, looks good.
All right. So let me just set up the cameras and let's just kind of talk about the car. You stand in your spot here if you don't mind. Get set up. All right, Manny, just make sure you're in the view of this camera here. And then I'll go to back to my spot.
All right.
All right, so we are at 8:45. We've got a few more minutes to chat. The question is, would you buy it? Or let's say if you're an individual interested in getting started in an air-cooled car, what type of person would this car be good for? Certainly not a first-time, non-mechanically inclined person, unless they have a big checkbook. If they have a big checkbook, then yeah, maybe you can do that.
If you don't have the history of since this doesn't have any history, there's a lot of gambling going on, and you definitely negotiate that with the price, mainly because of the engine. That's a big unknown. It looks great, but we could have serious problems in there. Why was it parked so long? I was watching a episode of Chasing Classic Cars, and they all joked that one of the cars, they said it's parked for a reason. Why did it get parked? That's the mystery you got to find out.
So as it sits, I would guess this car, as it sits, take it away on a trailer, I would say this car is maybe 25, 30. What do you guys think? 25 grand? Are you with me, or you think it's lower? Do you think it's higher? Because if this car was a running car, I would say that easily adds $10,000 to $15,000 worth of value, right? So if that's $10,000 to $15,000 worth of value, this car could be $50,000, $60,000, but then you add in that it's a non-sunroof car, so maybe even higher than 60s if it was running.
Yeah, the red flags are, of course, it's a C4, which isn't a bad thing, but you got to make sure all the part of the all-wheel drive works correctly, and they can be somewhat complicated, certainly much more than a regular two-wheel drive 964. The rust issue around the windshield, we don't know how much rust there is and what exactly that's going to cost us. And of course, beat a dead horse, that engine. What's the story behind the engine? Because a rebuild can go, maybe if you're lucky, 15,000. If everything is being used, up to like 30,000.
I was going to say a motor rebuild done right on this car is easily 30 grand.
Yeah, when we did mine on my race car, we got lucky because the crank, the piston, the cylinders were all in spec. I ended up missing a shift, so I had to rebuild mine. But it's not, labor's not cheap and parts are not cheap. And the cost for engine parts are much more expensive than a 3.2.
So it looks like a lot of folks online here agree with us that it's probably about a $20,000 to $25,000 car. Most seem to think the motor's probably kaput, which is the reason why they parked it. So where do we go from here, Manny? Let's say I'm willing to take the risk that this car at 25 grand might be a good buy for me. What would we do next?
If you want to just as a driver, get that engine looked at, get the drivetrain looked at, and just fix the rust. And then you work from there. It's a great basis. It's not rust anywhere that I can see. Like you said, the paint's in great shape, interior is in great shape. It's a very nice example that you can either keep stock or start to mod it out a little bit.
Yeah. So what would you guys do? Would you keep it stock and just maybe refreshen the suspension, get the motor running and drive it as is? Or would you do something like a more aggressive suspension, lower it a little bit, maybe some little hot rod parts on it? I mean, it's such a clean car.
Put 17-inch wheels on it.
Yeah. Maybe do like Cup 2 wheels on it.
Yeah, they've
Those
become
would look cool.
I love the BBS look. Or the Speedline 3-piece wheels, and they make a lot of replicas of that. That looks great on this car.
What's the 964? It was a street car, but it was like a cup. It was like a cup version. It was lightweight.
It was a Carrera RS. The
Carrera RS
they built in Europe.
Yeah.
The really uber rare one is the C4 lightweight.
Ooh.
I think they only made 21 of those, and that is to me one of my favorite cars because it's a car that most people walk right by at a show, not realizing. I saw at a Works Reunion we had one, and people walked right by not realizing they were probably looking at the rarest car they'll ever see, the Porsche in their life, because they only made 21 of them. But yet it looks like a regular C4 that's maybe modded for the track. But that car was something Jurgen Barth did, very lightweight, C4, made for rallying. Him and his little elves at Wysock built it in the shop.
That's kind of the direction I would go. I think I would want to take the non-essentials out, fairly good looking cosmetically, but mechanically kind of have it hot rodded and lightweight. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, you can go in steps with this car that still looks good.
So what do you think about C2 versus C4? How much of a do you think C2s typically go for more than the C4, or how does C4 work against or for this car?
Well, the most desirable, I believe, is the coupe C2. That's what everyone seems to be looking for, which goes against the grain. But most cars, the convertible version is the most desirable, like on a Speedster or a 326 cab. But on a 911, it's the coupe. With that said, now since there's a higher demand than there is supply, the condition is most important. C4 is not the end of the world. It's a little heavier, but there's a lot of guys that beat me with the C4 autocrossing, so it's really the driver behind it. And the Targa and Cabriolet, it's all what you want. I'm lucky that I waited out for my my coupe. I didn't settle on anything else. But yeah, the C2 is the most desirable coupe.
So we have a question here. Hopefully you can answer, Manny. The twin plug distributor in the 89 was not vented, so the belt tended to oxidize and break. Did Porsche add the event in 1990? When did that come about?
I thought it was like maybe 91, maybe 92. When I think most everyone I've seen has that upgrade done to it already.
Okay.
Yeah, and if they don't, it's not a hard upgrade to do, or have your shop do it. But it's one you definitely should do.
So we said this car, as it sits, 25 grand, let's say. If this was a C2, how much would you say this car would be? How much difference?
In the condition, not a whole lot, because once again, that engine's a big. It's the elephant in the room. What shape is that engine in? And then the drivetrain.
So could this car? I mean, I know you can do anything, but let's say, could you disconnect the front?
Yep.
And just run it as a C2 car?
Sure.
Okay. Oh.
I don't know about disconnecting it if it's that easy.
Yeah.
But removing it, there's a lot of club racers who took a 964 C4s and removed the front part of the drivetrain and made it into a C2, but still used the C4 braking and hydraulic braking that they used on cup cars.
Yeah. Again, if I'm playing the dream, if this was my car, again, I'd go with the lightweight theme. If I could disconnect and make it two-wheel drive, I think that's kind of the direction I would go. Get rid of all the complexity up front here, but I don't know. I'm not an expert, so maybe that's not a good idea. But I want to get this car back to its sort of simpler self and just make it light and fun. And hopefully, this car, again, if you haven't watched before, this car was actually donated to PCA, and the whole idea for the person to donate this car is that we will use it to do things like this, to have exercises and or seminars and or projects to work on this car, and we will do it for a couple of years, and we'll probably take it to parade, we'll take it to Tech Tactics. I think what I'd like to do is get all of your input on the future of this car and what we should do with it, because it's certainly deserving of getting back on the road in some fashion, and you guys can contribute and be a part of that all. So Manny, we are about 5 minutes to the top of the hour. Some buying tips. Let's go through that.
Yeah, so we had a member from San Diego Region. I found his buying tips online, and I asked him if we could use it. He said definitely. It was a
shout out to Garrett Guess from the San Diego region.
Yeah.
This checklist, and we'll make it available, and we'll put a link to it, and it's pretty comprehensive.
It's like a checklist where it lets you look at the car and not necessarily have a mechanic with you, and where you say, okay, this is worth me investing into a PPI. It's a pretty comprehensive, but I looked through it, and it's exactly what I would recommend people check from my experiences of helping friends and buying 964s myself.
So make sure you drive one before you buy one. And
Yes.
in this case, we couldn't drive it, and that's a big factor when you're considering purchasing a car. And as I did today, bring along a 964 owner, because they're gonna know the nuances of the model and see things. Honestly, if I was first shopping for a 964 and I saw this as polished the way it is, I'd just fall in love with it because it's a gorgeous car. But having a 964 owner, kind of knowing where the telltale signs of rust and options and all that kind of stuff, as you've seen tonight, it's pretty important to bring a 964 owner with you. Have a full pre-purchase inspection done by a shop that knows 964s. I say this all the time in my Mart Fresh recommendations: is if you're going to take a car to a shop, take it to a shop that knows that car, not just necessarily a Porsche shop. Like if they work mostly on later model cars that are water cooled, and you're getting a PPI on an air cooled car like this, take it to a shop that knows the air cooled cars, because it makes a difference. They're gonna know what to look for, right? Our next tip here: ownership, maintenance records, vital. Now
Yes.
we do know the owner of this car, but he didn't pass along many maintenance records. But instead of that, let me just turn the camera here, and I'm going to show you guys the bench. Now, I'm not a detective, but I would say that any owner that had all of these baggies of things in the back of this car when we picked it up seems to be pretty meticulous. So that's kind of a positive sign. I'm not saying that he's done everything right with maintenance, because maintenance records is definitely better, but someone that actually baggies all the different parts that he had for this car, that's kind of a good sign.
Yeah, I mean, he was obviously looking to maintain it or replace some parts.
Yeah, and as Manny said, we found quite expensive parts here that we can use. So that might add a little bit of value to the car when you're
Records are though. You hear it for anything you buy. Records are so important. Air conditioning on this car, not inexpensive to fix. It can and chasing it down. The evaporator's underneath the gas tank. So on my car, it took us about 2 months to trace down where this leak was coming from, and then we had to remove the gas tank. So if an owner says it just needs a charge, it'll work great, don't take that at face value, because these are complicated
and with these
things.
older cars, it's really important to test everything. And we couldn't test a lot of things because the engine's not running. Nathan Mers, who contributes to Panorama and PCA, when he does a inspection on a car, he pretty much flips and turns on every single switch. Because, for example, if the window doesn't go down, or if the door locks don't work, or the air conditioning, as Manny said, doesn't work, that's all dollars, big dollar signs when things like that don't work. So take that. We didn't have the time tonight, but if you're looking at a car, take the time from front to back and flip every switch, turn everything on, and make sure all of it works. And if it doesn't,
and do stuff like, and ask the owner if it's okay, but wet the car down, see if it's leaking any water. With power windows on, I found this on my 911, dry, went up and down, no problem. As soon as it got wet, that moisture provided enough tension where it was taxing the motor. So the motor was going down slowly and breaking down, but with the dry, it worked perfect. So we replaced it, and it works great in the dry or wet. But something we wouldn't have discovered, or I discovered after I washed it one time.
And that was money that you had to spend to fix it.
Exactly.
All right, our last tip of the evening as we get to the top of the hour is don't fall in love with the first vehicle you look at. I am so guilty of this because you're dreaming about getting an air-cooled, or any car for that matter, and the first one you go is probably going to be fairly good looking, and you're willing to overlook so many things because it's the first car you saw and you want to take it home so bad. And I'm not saying don't buy the first car, but bring somebody that can slap some sense into you in case that, in case if this car was my first car to look at, I'm pretty sure I can count on Manny hitting me with, a $30,000 bat saying, you get this car, the car's probably the cheapest part of it right now, because if that engine needs a full rebuild, you're going to have to double your money to get this car right. And that's important to understand. And as much as I'm so appreciative that we have this car here, but there are other examples there. If you're not mechanically inclined and you're going to have to pay the hour rates for somebody to bring it back, you might consider a car that is already running, right? So you'll end up spending the same amount of money, but you'll get to drive it now as opposed to later. And a
lot of these are closing in on 30 years. So 30 years is 30 years as they're coming. The oldest models are turning 30, 31. It's still that's an old car.
Yeah, and all of them are going to require some kind of work, right?
Correct.
Just a matter of how much. So we're at the top of the hour. Again, if you enjoyed the episode, please like, subscribe, comment, and we'll catch you next time. If you want to see something else about this car, let us know, and we'll plan for that down the road. For now, stay safe, be healthy. Thanks for joining us. Bye.